Hey folks, this is Lucid, and this is going to be the Pretender overview or Pretender guide for the upcoming game I have with Lanka. First, I'm just going to show you the last test game I've done. I've been tinkering with Lanka. God, I've played a lot of games as Lanka, not in Dominions 5, but back in like Dominions 3 and 4, I played them a lot. As you remember in the national overview, they've been nerfed in multiple kind of ways. Some directly to the nation, others through the bless system, coming from Dom 3 to Dom, or some from Dom 4 to Dom 5. So anyway, I haven't felt super comfortable with what I've picked, but I think this is what I've landed on. You can see we expanded pretty well. I think we're at 21 or 22 provinces. And we didn't cheat and do some spiderweb thing. We kind of went after things in a nuclear pattern like we would in a game. This is our god that we probably wound up taking for the game, Snooky. We went for a shock resistance, fire resistance, so fire shock resistance bless, with regen, blood vengeance, and invulnerability 10. Now, we're going to talk about the other kind of options we can do for Pretender design in a minute. We'll go to the Pretender design screen. I think before I go there, I wanted to talk a little bit about what are the things we need out of our bless, and what are the different ways to play the nation. Well, you can't. There's a few things I just want to talk about on the roster real quick. One is the Light Bandar Warrior. If you want to go scales, this guy is decent against players, depending who you're fighting, because he hits really hard so he can get through protection, and the sticks and stones can be good against elves. Depending who you're playing, and if you mask them, they're pretty okay. You can kind of do scales. I didn't really want to do scales for this, but that was kind of a goal of mine back in Dominions 4. I think it was come up with a scales build for Lanka. And the idea would have been you can focus more, kind of like Zabalba. We kind of played Zabalba a little bit more scales heavy than we did bless heavy, if you watch the Zabalba series. And, again, we have really good mages, right? So focus on the mages. The troop, we'd still get our blood summons, but they would be more not incidental. They could be a core part of our strategy, but they just wouldn't have a great bless, because they're still good units. And if you have more money from going scales, you can have more mages to potentially blood hunt more and get more blood summons, etc. But it also opens up cool play with Light Bandar Warriors, because you can do, you can do Wind Guide on these guys. If you have a way to get strength buffs, you can do those on them too. Really, you don't have earth magic, so the soonest you're going to be getting strength buffs, unfortunately for these guys, is probably like Rush of Strength, which, by the way, is a very good spell in this nation. And you can focus more on the undead production if you have more money. So it's kind of interesting trying to go for scales. It's more of like the undead Lanka playthrough, I think. I tested it a fair amount. What I found for scales is you can actually expand reasonably. I'm not going to say okay. You can expand well enough using Markata archers and Atavi archers. And you get squads of about 100 of them, and they do okay. You can mix in some Atavi infantry, put them in kind of the front squad. You want to try to give them a good leader, because they're going to run like all get out if they get hit. So a little bit of morale bonus is going to help. And then if they do horribly against heavy cav. So if you're fighting heavy cav, you're going to need either some of these guys who have a big freaking mace, and they're low resources, so this is probably what you would get to bulk up a heavy cav squad. Throw in some of your hard-hitting sacreds, or throw in some of these guys to punch through the heavy cav armor. Anyway, I think I got 12-something provinces year one, and that was after not like a ton of testing. I think I probably could have gotten like 14, which would have been okay. And massing archers is sometimes okay against a player that's going to, like rush you, but it can also be very not okay, depending. Switching to Bandar Warriors, which you easily kind of can by the end of year one, is going to be much more kind of versatile for dealing with threats, but you can definitely imagine scenarios where it's not going to be sufficient. Fortunately, there's lots of low-tier blood stuff where if you have a lot of blood mages, you can get by, and if you have skeleton production online already, which if you're going scales, you kind of could, you know, it would be interesting to try. I don't feel comfortable doing that in, I think, a competitive multiplayer game. So we're not going to be doing that. Instead, we are going to be going for a Hellbless, like we have, which is Fire Shock Resistance, Regen, Blood Vengeance, and Invulnerability. Now, why do we take that? What are the things we need in a Bless? Well, expansion with these guys is a little tricky. At the beginning, especially if you tank your scales, which you're going to need to do if you have a Hellbless, your first 2 expansion parties are going to be primarily made of Ansaras. And, yeah, these guys have shit protection, so they're going to die. You can make them either really killy, give them a quickness bless. I've seen these guys do real well with that. Or you can kind of go for a more defensive bless like we have by getting Stygian Flesh, or Stygian Skin, which is going to give them a nice protection bonus. And then the regen, on it, combined with Blood Vengeance, is going to help them kind of survive and then return some damage to indies which are attacking them. The final part, Fire Shock Resistance. There's a lot of reasons we want that. One of the reasons is, well, okay, let's go through them. So what is like late mid-game for us? Well, late mid-game, especially if we go the Sacred route, we're going to have a lot of Sacreds on the field. We potentially can be doing major Thunderstrike spam, and we potentially can be doing Wrathful Skies if we want to. Now, if we do Wrathful Skies and we have Blood Vengeance on our dudes, we are going to blow up our Wrathful Skies caster. So if we do it, we really don't want our Sacreds to take damage. Now, there's a few ways to kind of mitigate that. One way is we put, like, anti-magic... we put a bunch of kind of MR gear on our caster of Wrathful Skies. And the second is we make sure they have as much regen as we can give them. And the third way, and this, honestly, you really probably have to do all 3 of these if we're going to actually do this strategy. We're going to need shock resistance on our Sacreds if we want to be casting Wrathful Skies in the mid-game. And ideally we have shock resistance 15, because that's about how much I think the bolts do. So ideally we can do Thunderfend and Wrathful Skies and have our guys blessed with 10 shock resistance. If that is the case, we will only be taking chip damage on our Sacreds, which will still be significant, but hopefully if we have the MR and regen on our caster, it won't blow them up. So anyway, that's one of the reasons for shock resistance. Now, the nations that are going to be in this game, we've got a lot of air nations too, so that's another reason to go shock resistance. There's a Niflheim in the game too, of course, so which would make the case for cold resistance. If we were doing a rainbow build, we would, but we don't. We're not. So, yeah. We're just going to hope that with our Heat Dominion, they're going to stay out. The fire resistance, yeah, we don't have many fire nations in the game, so we kind of don't need it. But if you don't take fire resistance on Lanka, you're in a bit of a hard time. Lanka does not have a very easy way of getting fire resistance on its troops. Normally, to get fire resistance, you're going to need fire or water. And if you have either of those schools, you can get fire resistance if you go up either enchantment or alteration. We have no fire, we have no water. So if somebody casts Firestorm, and I haven't figured out how to get like either Army of Gold up on the armies, or I haven't figured out how to get, which is Earth. So there's kind of a little snake way in with Earth. Or I haven't been able to get up whatchamacallit, Firefend or Warriors of Methuselah, I think is what it is. Or maybe it's Warriors of Niflheim, I can't remember. Anyway, if I haven't been able to get fire resistance on my troops, we're going to be in for a major hurting. Now, fortunately, Blood Vengeance kind of counters that, because if we're taking a lot of damage on our Sacreds but from a battlefield wipe and it's their caster, we may blow them up. But they can do the same thing I can do. The only difference is, like if they're stacking MR and regen, the only difference is I'm going to be taking a shit ton of damage. So I'm going to be reflecting a shit ton of damage back at them if I don't, or if I have no fire resistance. So you can get away, if you want to have better scales, you can ditch fire shock resistance, but you're going to be giving up basically the ability to do Wrathful Skies yourself if you go Blood Vengeance. And you're going to be your counter to the enemy casting things like Firestorm is going to be Blood Vengeance, which is a kind of tricky counter because it's not super reliable. The other problem with relying on Blood Vengeance to deal with something like having a fire weakness is it's not going to work against fire elementals. And fire elementals risk these guys' life. Now, again, we don't have an Abyssi, I don't think. There might be like one Fire Nation in the game, if that. So anyway, I think we've kind of... Okay, well, let's talk about the things we need in our Bless a bit more. So on one hand, we want to have a way where we can use our Sacreds to deal with the thing. So what is our army going to be? We're going to have a lot of Sacreds, we're probably going to have a lot of Undead, and we're going to have a lot of Mages. Now, the things... What we want our Sacreds to be good at is for dealing with things that our Undead are not going to be able to deal with. And generally, those are going to be things that, are like battlefield-wide nukes. So that's why I'm kind of spending an especially large amount of time thinking about it. The other thing, our Sacreds are already going to be pretty good at dealing with thugs just because they hit so hard. And we have magic weapons on some of our Sacreds, so we can switch to those if we're really worried about Fog Warrior. So magic weapons, less of a priority. But some of our Sacreds don't have it, so it's not a horrible idea. So yeah, we're looking at ways to basically leverage our Sacreds, and spammable Blood Vengeance Sacreds are pretty damn good. The other thing that's nice about Blood Vengeance is in the late game, once Demonic Cleansing comes out, you get wrecked by Demonic Cleansing, and there's no way to protect it. You can't... once Demonic Cleansing comes out, you get so wrecked by so many different things. And there's nothing you can get in your Bless or anything or spell you're going to cast that's really going to protect you from it. The only way to kind of protect yourself from it, honestly, is Blood Vengeance. So if the game does go super late, Blood Vengeance is super important there. So, okay, anyway, our Bless, we want our Sacreds to be relevant for expansion. We want them to be relevant in early and mid-game wars, and then we want them to be relevant later. And that's kind of what I've come up with for this Bless. We went for the Hell Bless, basically trying to make the Sacreds good at all phases in the game. The other thing we care about for our Bless is our Thugs. And, so like this guy, he has Fire Weakness, which is not great on a Thug. He does not have Fear, which is a bit of a zinger, because that means you're actually going to have to kill enough stuff to make the enemy run. Once you get Alteration 3, these guys kind of come online because you can do things like Mirror Image, you can do things like Mist Form, Skeletal Body, Blessing. The Death 2 ones, when you get higher, you can even do things like Soul Vortex if you put a Death Gem on them. And they can Cloud Trap Piece too, which is really nice. But with Mist Form and stuff, because you don't have Fear, and unless you have a brand or something, I mean, you can kind of fix it by having a particularly killy weapon. But generally, because these guys don't have Fear, they're going to be, and they don't have Fire Shield, they're going to be killing things kind of slowly. They're going to take a fair amount of damage. And with Mist Form, a lot of times you'll find these guys die, especially in a solo kind of thug raiding operation. And they kind of need a regen. And regen is one of the things that's pretty expensive to provide by gear. We can, but it's expensive. So it's really for these guys, they really do like regen. It combos super well with Mist Form. And they also don't mind a bit more protection. Now, their natural protection already is pretty high, so they don't get a huge boon out of Stygian Skin. Your other guys also have, these guys also have pretty high natural protection. It's 5. So that for these guys, it's only going to go up from 5 to 10. So it's not huge, but it's significant. And for these guys, it's significant too. Getting 2 more protection, I think effective protection, when you factor in the diminishing returns of combining armor and natural protection, it's still significant. And it makes it a little bit harder for Mist Form to pop. And then anyway, the fire shock resistance is also welcome. These guys can do shockwave too if you want them to, especially the Air 3 variety. And a little bit of shock resistance is always going to be welcome. If you have the storm spool and you do and you have a 10 shock resistance bless, that will probably be enough for you to get away with shockwaving yourself. So yeah, Blood Vengeance, much less relevant for these dudes. Much less relevant. The Blood Vengeance is mostly for the your summonable units, but you know it's not horrible on them either. Anyway, so I think we've talked about kind of what you want in your bless. We want a bless that's going to be good on our thugs. It's going to allow us to expand with our sacreds. Hopefully, allow us to use battlefield-wide stuff and counter things that our skeletons are weak against, as well as deal with super late game, the thing that just absolutely murders Lanka, like the hard counter to Lanka, which is demonic cleansing. So anyway, we'll go ahead and now pull up some of our... I've made so many... Look at all these Lanka pretenders. A lot of them are kind of similar. It's just oscillating, wavering, testing, a bunch of things. Okay, so... God, I feel like some of these are going to be really bad. We'll kind of click on them real quick. This actually is kind of interesting. This is hard skin, which is going to be 5 natural protection, which actually is going to be superior to bark skin or other things like that. For a lot of your sacreds. And like for your, not for a lot of your sacreds, for some of them that have 5 natural protection, it's equivalent to bark skin. For like for your commanders, like the Raksharajas, they have 7, so this is going to give them natural protection of 12. Additionally, Blood Surge is going to be pretty nice for everybody because they're rather killy. And Blood Bond is pretty sweet because Blood Bond is going to make it very, very difficult for you dudes to die. Because you're going to have so many sacreds, there's going to be a ton of damage getting distributed. What you're missing here is regen, and that can be okay. There's a lot. I've seen a lot of Blood Bond builds that do pretty well without regen. I think if you go something like this, you kind of want to look at, and maybe this isn't really optimal, but you would, if you take Blood Bond, you do want to look at the Asrapas as being your primary blood summon because they have Berserker, and Berserker is going to combo reasonably well with hard skin because the 3 protection you get from Berserk is going to stack with the 5 protection you get from this. So that's nice. Yeah. So anyway, that's one. Oh, we need to talk about the scales. What is this? This is probably something stupid. Yeah, some imprisoned incarnate bless. Don't do this. Where this is interesting is if you can figure out, because scales are pretty good. I'm not sure. I've oscillated a lot on what scales one should take. But if you can pull something like this off, oh man, Undead Command. That might be better than what I have. Well, I'm not sure. I don't think so. Anyway, yeah, if you can pull something like this off, I don't know, it's too greedy. Anyway, that's why it's labeled greed. You can do a rainbow build. This one, Regen, Blood Bond, Imprisoned. This is not going to be good. Let's just make them because I've honestly just been a little bit all over the place when I've been testing these. You can do all sorts of rainbows, right? So this chassis, the one that I'm using, high new magic path cost. So if you go truly rainbow, you don't really want to use her. We'll get this guy who's super cheap for going rainbow. Well, maybe we do Great Enchantress, Archmage. We do this guy. We can do like major fire resistance and attack skill. I mean, honestly, you can just do a rainbow, guys. I'm not going to sit here and build it. Depending on what nations are in the game will determine what resistances you're going to want. You're probably going to want shock resistance. You also have two-handed weapons, so you do get a fair bit of mileage out of strength bonuses. So even just getting 4 additional strength like this is going to have a pretty major impact on your game. You can get defense too. It's definitely not bad. Or you can get cold resistance. Well, let's say we go with this because we're going to be... This will allow us to be maybe a bit more aggressive. And then Spirit Sight, not that great. I mean, normally it's pretty good, but I mean, you have dark vision on a lot of your troops, so kind of gimps you there. And then, magic weapons is pretty good, but you could also go magic resistance. Maybe we could do this and get the extra one too. Magic resistance, pretty nice. If you're doing a rainbow, Undead Command is really good on this nation because you have a shit ton of undead. And you're going to be having to make a fair amount of Mound Fiends to ferry these guys around. We'll get major shock resistance here. And then for nature, you can go poison resistance. It's definitely not a bad idea, especially if you don't have regen. Poison resistance, I would say, is extra important. So I guess we'll do that here. Basically just stacking up resistances on Sacreds. I mean, this is like a super standard Rainbow Bless. For scales, I feel like you want at least... 5 is a little skimpy. I think you kind of want at least 6 candles because you... Especially if you're making like Insuras for expansion, you're going to want a fair amount of them. And you can see we haven't really helped our Sacred expansion that much. They basically have 2 more attack, 2 more defense, and 4 more strength. Which is nice, but it's not like, holy crap, they're way better now. Probably take the bump up to Heat 3. You almost always want to go Turmoil with Lanka. There were some builds about Order Lanka, which is kind of like scales. And you don't really rely on many of your units that have chaos power. Instead, you rely more on like undead, and then you can still do a bless, but you're going to focus more on this guy who doesn't have chaos power. Growth. Now, we need to talk about growth. I didn't really talk about some of the way I'm planning on playing this nation. I'm planning on playing this nation in a way I've never played a Blood Nation before. And it is going to be a tale of 2 cities. And what I mean by that is in my high population places, so like farmlands or, large provinces, we are probably going to be casting Blood Fecundity. And that spell will increase growth scales by 2. So it's going to cost us some blood slaves, but we're going to have it reasonably early. Everything else, we are going to strip mine. So my plan for, let's say I run into like a 6,000 population province. I'm going to put a lot of blood hunters on it. We're going to patrol it. And I'm going to blood hunt it probably till we get down to like 2,500. Once it's at 2,500, I'm going to move in the reanimators, and we are going to ghoulify the population. And then I'm going to take the ghouls and I'm going to stick them in my high-income, forwarded high-income provinces. And the idea... Now, I'm not going to get it all the way to 0 because I still want to be able to put a tiny bit of PD, but it's going to be mostly worthless. So the idea is I'm not going to be super vulnerable to raiding. It'll just be like gem income. There's going to be little incentive for people to attack me because, okay, you take some of my land... You can't even probably do like a true PD dump because I don't even have enough population there for you to do a real PD dump. And we're just going to make counter raiding to take my stuff back pretty easy. And you're never going to get my forts because they're going to have like 400 siege strength in them. Every single fort. And so the idea basically is we're going to burn the countryside. And we're going to have these super rich cities, or, super reasonably rich cities. There will be some trade-off. Obviously, my income's going to kind of suffer as I burn the countryside. But hopefully in doing so, we will have enough blood slaves to drive our military where we can continue conquest and fueling the engine. So this is not going to be a kind of chill-out turtle build. This is going to be gas, gas, gas. We're not going to be doing sustainable blood hunting practices. Oh, no. Yeah. Now, luck or misfortune, ideally you're going to take luck. Unfortunately, um, this one, okay, we have to talk about order turmoil. I mean, sloth productivity. Um, if you're going scales, there's arguments to be made for like getting more Bandar warriors if you take productivity. If you're not, you can trash it, which is what we're gonna do because we're still even with this, we'd probably still do pretend or sacred expansion. Now, anyway, ideally you combo order and turmoil and luck, but we're a little too poor. We're gonna go imprisoned, so that's going to obviously give us a shit ton more points. So we'll go like this. We actually can probably buff up our build a tiny bit. I think this is how we would do it. So yeah, this would be like a more scales rainbow build. Obviously, this is going to be kind of nice. You may sub out defense for cold resistance, but just remember as we take like attack and defense out, we're going to be weakening ourselves in the early game. But, this army is kind of hard to counter until, you're not going to foul vapors it or anything. But it's also not phenomenal against normal stuff. Like normal troops, it's not going to be like gangbusters against. It's more like it's good against mages and stuff anyway. I think we've talked about all the scales. This is going to help a bit, taking as much productivity as you can. In this case, it's just going to be 0. Magic we haven't really talked about. There's some nice things about going Drain. We're not in Astral Nation. We potentially can get Mind Hunted. We're not going to be doing Mind Hunting. In those cases, it's kind of nice to take Drain. The problem we have with going Drain is we don't have very good research on our dudes. These guys are only 7. So in Drain 3, these guys are going to be 4 research, which is obviously horrible. If we use these guys to research, we'll be a bit better off, but they still go from 13 down to 10. Fortunately for us, we have a fair amount of low construction research boosters. We have basically all of the low construction research boosters. We have access basically to the Alquils, which are pretty trivial for us. We have access to Imp Familiars, and we have access to Skull Mentors. And that's where a lot of our Air and Death Gems are going to go if we go Drain, which in this case, we're not going to. A problem, though, in addition to this, one of the things we learned from playing Zabalba, if we really want to lean on our mages to be really, really tough and do a lot of Sabbaths and things like that, we want to think about going magic. And that will allow our Rock Tapatas to be much more effective in communions or in Sabbaths. That way when they become, cast Sabbath Master, they don't pass out. Now, we can get around this, even if we go Drain, basically by using Blood 2s as Sabbath Masters. So it can be the Kalamuka, which are these guys. We can use the Blood 2 versions as Communion Masters. We can just wait. We can let them take a nap and then wake back up. Or we can use our cap-only mages, like these guys, as Communion Masters too. So we have a lot of different options. If you go Hellbless, which is kind of what we're going to do, then it's kind of hard to take magic. I think I have a build here. We're going to look through a couple of these. Anti-greed are more interesting. So this was another one I was thinking about really hard. Here I take Drain 3 instead of Sloth 3. And I think this probably is a mistake. I think you would try to go 0 I think you would go Sloth 3 0 Drain. Because with 0 Drain, you'll only probably take a nap for 1 turn, which is pretty quick for Sabbath. Ideally, you go Magic 1, but you couldn't quite swing it with this. You might be able to swing it if you drop down to 6 Dominion, I'm not sure. But I was real close to using something like this for my Pretender. Coming down, the other thing is these are all awake. And why I called it anti-greed is because having an awake immobile actually is going to give you crazy research. So Yeah, basically we're going to have thugs come online much sooner because we're going to be doing 50 research a turn right at the beginning, which is not going to help us much for long-term research so much. For us, it kind of will because it will speed up our access to Construction 4, which is going to give us all the other research boosters. But, anyway, the Drain 3 is going to bite you in the butt for magic research basically the whole game. Do I have anything else terribly interesting to show? We have... Yeah, this is not terribly interesting. Okay, regen fortitude magic weapons I think is also viable. This is awake with... I think this is kind of... This might be... Yeah, I mean, this is going to be pretty similar to the scales we would take. Fortitude is going to be nice, cutting damage in half. I mean, that's going to be really good, basically, no matter what. Because we're never going to have this on our thugs any other way. So anyway, this is super good. I think this is definitely worth considering. And then monoliths are, of course, nasty. You can mono-drop people with them. And then I do like Magic 1. So I don't know. This, I think, is fine. I don't really have an issue with it. The only things are, maybe you don't go magic weapons because you can get magic weapons on summons. But especially if you're fighting a lot of air nations like we are, it may be a good idea just because that way you don't have to pick your summon based on whether they have magic weapons or not. You can kind of get the more budget variety and then give them magic weapons with your bless. But anyway, I will show you Snooki now, who is going to be... We don't normally do pop culture references, but I figured what better pretender chassis to name Snooki. The seducing... She has two forms, a human form and then this ogre. So anyway. Okay. So here what we're doing Drain 2. Fortunately we didn't have to go Drain 3, but I would have. We're doing Growth 1, again, because it's Tale of Two Cities. And then we are doing Misfortune 2, because Misfortune 3 is evil. I think this will probably open us up to Magic is Fading events too. I'm not sure if you have to have 3 in either of these. I think there's like a not as bad one that happens with the 2s. But yeah. The nice thing about having completely dumpstered scales is almost all the thrones are good for you. Either they're going to improve your scales, or they're going to make them worse, which they can't really get much worse. Yeah, so anyway. This is the build we're going with. I think honorable mentions, do consider builds with Blood Bond. They can be really good. Do consider builds with Fortitude. Do consider builds, Regen obviously is going to be really good. Anyway, we'll see how it goes. What I do like about this is I do feel very comfortable in an early game situation. I'm going to have a lot of tools early for thugging. I'm going to have a lot... My sacreds are going to be no pushover. And because I'm going to get a bit of early research and we have a lot of low-hanging fruit in blood magic, like we get Blood 4, we're going to be able to get a lot of different summons. I feel like I'm going to power spike very early. Like normally I think Lanka is a bit of a rush target, but I feel like I'm going to be very strong early, which is good. So anyway, that is that. So actually I think we're going to go ahead and submit our pretender. And with that, I will see you in the game. Take care, folks.